Okay, Ken, it's 11 o'clock here in the Pacific Coast and 1 p.m. And 2 p.m. should I say Eastern time right now. So I think we could get started. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thanks. I'm happy to report that here in Grapevine, Texas, things are starting to warm up. I think our cold days are behind us, and I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, excellent. I think everybody today is reporting some nice weather, so that's wonderful. Well, what I'd like to do, Ken, is if you don't mind, I'll give a brief introduction to you. Thank you, first of all, for giving us your time today. Really appreciate it, and I look forward to the conversation that we're about to have. For listeners to the webinar, we are going to be conversational format. We're not going to put you through the torture of a PowerPoint presentation today. So as we have the conversation and as questions come up, could you please use the chat box and we'll flag your questions and comments and respond to them as we go through the work session. Very well. So my name is Stephen Yates. I'm an executive vice president with BuildExact. BuildExact is a software solution for construction management for custom home builders and remodelers. My responsibility with BuildExact is to actually connect our builders with their supply chain, with their very important suppliers. And so it's no coincidence that Ken and I have like minds about the conversation that we're going to have today. Now, Ken is a carpenter, he's a mason, he's a plumber, an electrician. And I think one of the remarkable things, Ken, about you is you built 5 houses while you were in high school.
I did.
Right? You're a steel worker, a heavy equipment operator. You've had formal training in estimating and project management. You've got experience in government contracting. You've got technical experience around estimating and project controls, cost controls. You've developed projects or worked on projects, including schools, office buildings, residential, etc. And I think here my notes say you influenced the construction of over 25,000 single-family residences.
Indeed.
Pretty extraordinary. And in addition to all that, in your spare time, you have published a book called How Much is the Milk?, which I have read over the last couple of weeks, and it was a great read. I really appreciate it. And really what you're talking about in that book is how to uncover the greatest cost savings in residential construction by listening to your suppliers. I think it's a wonderful idea. Toward the end of the book, you say you worked on a process improvement program, and really one of the major insights was the group was profoundly influenced by how important good management of materials and the process of procuring materials was to the ultimate success and construction sales life cycle. So with that introduction, Ken, really keen to hear your comments today and look forward to having this dialogue with you.
Thanks, Steve. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have a chat with your listeners and share my experiences, and hope that some of my experiences might give them an opportunity to go back to their offices and make some changes or ask some questions they hadn't asked before. I'll tell you a little bit about my experiences, and some of the stories I'll tell you are successes, and I hope that you take those success stories and just build on them and do much better than I did. And I'll tell you a few failure stories too, in hopes that you don't make the same mistakes that I did. As Steve mentioned, I grew up with a tool belt around my waist. So I grew up as a tradesman. I can do, I've built schools, hospitals, office buildings, distribution centers, warehouses, roads, bridges, airport runways. The easiest thing I've ever built is a house. So the cool thing about being in residential construction, I spent 20 years in commercial construction and then went to residential. The cool thing about residential construction is how warm the business. It's a warm business compared to commercial construction. I mean, we care about home buyer satisfaction. We care about, keep a customer for life, that we sell them their next home and their next home, and sell their relatives and friends' homes. And in commercial construction, you may actually never even meet the owner, let alone care what he thinks about your work. You get in, do your work, and get out. So it's kind of a cold business. So I love how warm our business is and how we're building people's dreams, that we're, creating environments for families to thrive in, multi-generational families, or families who want to live close to each other. I have a special passion for lowering the cost to build a house so that more people can own a home. I think there's a lot of folks in our country that need a home that don't have one. And unfortunately, right now, with price appreciation, less and less people are able to buy them. So my contribution can be helping to reduce the cost to build a house. So of all my remarks today, and I hope that you'll ask questions along the way, and Steve will interrupt me and stop, and we'll field some of your questions. But I hope that you walk away with understanding that these methodologies do three things: reduce the cost to build a house, reduce the construction cycle time to build a house. Oh, how important is that? And increase production capacity of our entire supply chain, including labor, distributors, dealers, distributors, and manufacturers, and the trucks that deliver those products from one spot to the next. And so those three things can have a pretty profound impact on your business and our industry. And so, I'm not exactly sure how I got into supply chain management. It was an accident. And let me tell you how it happened. I was with a large home builder, and we had adopted continual improvement processes. We're using statistical process control to improve just about everything we were doing, from sales process to the land development process to accounting processes and marketing, and especially in construction. So I was in charge of construction department, and we were endeavoring to reduce this construction cycle time. At that time, I think we had a 98 or 95 day construction cycle time, and we were going to see how much smaller we could make that. And so we did this as a robust process as possible. And we chose 30 of our top subcontractors, those we had the closest relationship with, did the most, the highest quality work, and would stuck with us, through thick and thin for years. And we gave them a lot of pre-work. So look, this is your stage of construction. I want you to really dial in and find these opportunities to take a day out of the schedule here, a day out of the schedule there. And so they did about 3 weeks of intense work, pre-work, before the event. The event was 3 days. And for 3 days, working about 14 hours a day, we brought in group after group after group into the training room. We catered in every meal so that no one had to leave. There were no breaks. And we just went at it, arguing back and forth. Where are we going to find us that day? Let's take a day out here, day out there. And we were wrapping up. We were ready to get back. Our emails and voicemails had been piling up. We were ready to get back to work. We were exhausted. And I couldn't help thinking that there was something that we had missed. I remembered there was something somebody said, and we had caught it in the notes, but I don't remember what notes. I couldn't find it. So while everyone was putting papers into bankers' boxes and cleaning things up and putting the training room back in place, I just sat there wondering where that was. As I was rifling through some boxes, I found it. I found the note, and I remember the context, who said it, and why he said it. We had been talking about empty house days. So as a construction manager, it's the most obvious opportunity to reduce cycle time is to take empty house days out or reduce, the logic is that if you have someone in the house every day, it's productive and that progress is happening and that's efficient. And as soon as you have a house that's sitting empty for a day or 2 days or 3 days, it makes you wonder, that's if that might be the opportunity to reduce cycle time. And so we thought it was simply a scheduling thing. We didn't have the right people in the right place at the right time. So that if we could dial in the scheduling, that we could shrink the cycle time by eliminating empty house days. And then Miguel said something that we had brushed over. We just kind of light chuckle, ha ha ha, and we moved on. But we shouldn't have moved on, because what he said was vitally important and ended up being a hinge point for my entire career. Miguel said, I see what you're doing here. But you know, if the materials aren't there, it doesn't really matter if I show up on time or not. Oh, that's a really good point, isn't it? And so I thought, well, you know, at the time I was sitting there holding it. It was a Post-it note. I was sitting there holding that Post-it note, wondering, is this everything or is this nothing? And after some pondering, I decided it wasn't nothing, and that we needed to do another process improvement team that was just focused on material management and watching material management as it moved from manufacturers down to the job site. So but we weren't ready for that. and give you an example of, you know, the barriers that we hit trying to figure that out. So as a superintendent, I was tasked with writing a change order. There was some damage done inside one of my houses, and I don't know who did it. So I had to pay for it. The builder had to pay for it. And I pulled it was drywall damage, so I had to get the drywaller guys back in to do the repair. And so I pulled the contract folder to see how much this would be worth. So I see I need this many square feet of repairs, and let's see what we're paying them per square feet so that I can apply the right price and give them the right, the fair price for a change order. And so I pulled the contract folder, and all that was in there was a lump sum number. And so I was confused. I thought, oh, there's information they didn't send out to the field that they keep in the office, so I need to go get it. So I called the purchasing manager, and I said, hey, I'm missing some information. I'm trying to do a change order for my drywall contractor, and I can't find the unit price information. And he said, well, we don't use unit pricing. He says, we use lump sum, you know, we go out to bid, we use a competitive bid process to make sure we're getting the best price. We award to the low bid, and we write change orders as long as they look reasonable. To this day, I don't know what reasonable means. I'm not sure. I have no idea. And to be respectful, I didn't ask him. I just said, oh, okay, all right, and went on my way and wrote a change order that I thought was reasonable. Still don't know what that means. And was curious about that, because in my experience, you know, when I built houses in high school, of course I knew the price of every single material. I bought everything. I did almost all the labor, so I didn't subcontract, so I didn't have to look at labor. I joined the Navy Seabees and did construction for the Navy around many different parts of the world. And all the projects I worked on, I knew exactly what all the material prices were, all of my SKUs and all the quantities. So when I went into production home building, I was puzzled why we used lump sum pricing, and I figured it was a fault of my own, that they knew way more than I did. They'd been doing this for a long time, and I just needed to figure out what they knew. I was wrong. So I discovered that we needed to understand unit costing a lot better, and I likened it to buying groceries. So imagine that you go to buy groceries in a shopping center, in the grocery store, and you push your shopping cart around the aisles to pick up your products for the week. But in this store, there are no prices on any of the materials and no prices on any of the shelves. But you need your week's groceries, and so you fill it up. And you get to the cashier, and she rings you up, and she says that'd be $236.18. And you're curious, and you say, hey, I'm just curious, how much is the milk? And she, in a very practiced way, tells you, sir, it is not our policy to provide unit pricing for our products, but we feel that we provide the selection and environment that will keep you coming back week after week. And we know that if you compare a week's worth of groceries cost here to another place, that you'll find that we're competitive. And not really sure what that all meant, you ask, hey, I'm just curious, I just want to know, how much is the milk? And she doesn't answer. So nobody would shop at that store, right? Nobody. No nobody would ever shop at that store. But in home building, we do it all the time. And so I named my book, How Much is the Milk? Because it is really vital. It is kind of step one, understanding our SKUs, how many, what the quantities and our pricing, before we can do all these other supply chain methodologies to reduce cost, increase production capacity, and shorten cycle time. So that's the reason for the title of the book. It's something, it's that strange title, How Much is the Milk, for a supply chain management book for residential construction. But I had used that example for about 10 years in a lot of different venues, and so I thought it was good just to stick with it.
And Ken, I mean, it seems when you put it that way, when you use the story about the grocery store, I mean, it seems so obvious a question. And you use a phrase in the book, 3 bids in a prayer, lump sum pricing, out to 3. Why do you think the condition exists? What is happening out there in the builder community that they pursue that route? That there's just lump sum payments, 3 bids. What is the thought process leading to that situation?
That's a great question, and I am old enough to be able to answer it. So in the housing boom didn't really start until after World War II. The boys came home from war, they had some money, they had help from the government, and we had the baby boom. I mean, that's when the housing boom started. So in the 50s and the 60s and 70s, people building houses had their own employees building them. We didn't subcontract anything. So we knew all of our materials. We knew all of our prices for the carpenters and masons that we had on staff. In the 80s, things started to change. So the housing boom in the 80s, we came out of a doldrum of a recession in the 70s and the 80s, things started to change a little bit. And we wanted, as an industry, we wanted to become more efficient. And, if you have all of your own suppliers on staff, your own labor guys, it's not easy to keep your plumbers busy all of the time, unless you have a really massive operation. But a subcontractor who's working for multiple builders can keep those plumbers busy all of the time. And so that's when the shift to using subcontractors became quite robust. And then with another boom in the 90s, it just was complete. It was rare to find a builder other than a custom builder who had anyone on staff with a tool belt around his waist. And so we shifted because we felt that it was more efficient. Think about this. I was with Shea Homes San Diego in 1995. We were building 400 homes a year. We were the biggest builder in San Diego. And we, in our HVAC subcontractor, was doing HVAC on about 3,000 houses a year. So we naturally assumed, which by the way was not correct, we assumed that because his buying power was so much bigger than ours could have been for our single division, that they would do it so much better than we could. I've come to find out that's not necessarily true, but we assumed it was. We just assumed that the volume in and of itself was going to be there. And so we lost that core, as a builders, we lost that core competency to manage materials and material pricing. And it became so much easier and faster. I mean, speed was really the key in these housing booms, decade after decade. After little recession after little recession, the cycles brought in a need to build faster. And so the lump sum number seemed to be a fast way to get to market. It's not, by the way. Unit pricing is actually faster, but I'll tell you about that later. And so in comes the subcontractors and supersized subcontractors, and we kind of lost that core competency. So Steve, it's a great question. Thanks for asking it. Do you have a follow-up question, Steve?
Well, yes, and I think whenever we have someone work on a job site, right, your first thing you look at the tools, the quality of the tools, and how well the tools are maintained are going to give you a pretty good idea of what the work product is going to be. We use the phrase "we lost the competency," but to get to unit pricing, to get to the kind of fidelity that you talk about in your book, it's necessary to have the tools to be able to do that. And so from our perspective, part of the reason we got to this place is because builders didn't have the tools to be able to really manage their cost inputs at the project at an appropriate time to make good decisions.
Indeed, and managing unit costs isn't as hard as folks think it is, and the faith that we have put in the 3-bid process, I think, has really hurt us a bit. I think our subcontractors are a little bit savvy to the way we do business, and there's subcontractor interplay that builders are not always privy to that affects our business. Remember I told you that, you know, the purchasing manager I spoke to, he said, hey, we use the competitive bid process. We, you know, get multiple bids, we award to the low bid. And he was under the impression that that's all he needed to do to make sure he was paying the right price. So let me tell you a story about something that happened to me at another home builder. I had gone to work for him during the recession. So this is 2007. So, you know, the recession hit. We were stopped selling houses. Things were tough. And I just left Pulte Homes and did some really amazing things on supply chain management while there. Saved all kinds of money, increased production capacity like crazy. So a lot of success stories. And so I brought this over to this new builder that I went to work for, and he was excited. Hired me on the spot when we were at lunch. I went to work for him, and he said, you know, before you go to work on concrete, lumber, and drywall, which is the first 3 things I told him I was going to work on, he says, let's focus on manufacturer rebates. I thought, manufacturer rebates, that's not where the money is. And you certainly should not be paying someone as much as you're paying me to work on manufacturer rebates. But that's where he wanted to focus. And it was popular in the company, and that's, you know, it was exciting and had some sex appeal. And so they wanted to get lots of manufacturer rebates. And so I did what I was told. And, you know, I begged him for 2 years to let me work on lumber, concrete, and drywall. Finally, after 2 years, he said, let's just do one. So I chose drywall. He said, we'll do it in one community, in one division. We had 18 divisions across the country at the time. And he said that, and so he chose the community, which was real close to our corporate office. And so I took off like a sprinter out of the blocks, because I'm not sure how long he was going to, you know, and it allowed me to do this. So I ran out there and did my thing. So I have a process for managing drywall, in which I go to a house that's been drywalled with a tape measure, and I measure every square inch of every wall and every ceiling. I have a form that I fill it out in. I go back to the office, I key it all in, I measure everything in square inches, not in feet, and put that in my spreadsheet. My spreadsheet tells me exactly how many square feet of drywall were installed on the house. I know by experience that a fair waste factor for drywall is 9%. So I added 9% to that, came up with my total drywall. I knew, based on my experience, that I just spent a couple of years working at Pulte Homes and working with some distributors, drywall distributors. I knew how much drywall costs. I knew how much 1/2 inch and 5/8 drywall, and I knew what the going rate for labor was. So I put this all together, and I package it, and I pull the subcontract agreements, and I look at what we were paying on that community. And there was a big difference, and so I brought it to my boss. I said, "Hey, this is what I found, and I think we should call the contractor in." Well, he didn't want to do that. He just didn't want to do it. I mean, this is 2009. We're a couple of years into the recession. They had already called in their contractors over and over and over again, begging them to reduce prices so that we can survive this recession. Begging was their only strategy at that point. So they did it over and over again. They had done it enough times that my boss felt like there's no more blood we can squeeze from this stone. There's nothing left. And so he is embarrassed to call the contractor in, but he did it. I mean, the discrepancy was pretty huge. And so we went into the conference room, the subcontractors there, and he says, look, you know, hey, he was really squeamish, you know, about bringing him in. He was embarrassed. He was ashamed. He said, he said, Ken found some things that I thought we should have a chat about and just kind of clear it up. So I presented my case. So I opened all the spreadsheets that I had put together, everything that I had done. I told him the measuring process. I measured every wall and every ceiling. Here's the square inches of the drywall that's in this house. I showed him his contract folders and how I came to my pricing. Asked, are my quantities correct? Simply asking him to help me understand if I had gone wrong. And are my unit pricing, are they wrong for materials and for labor? Did I get anything wrong on that? He said, no, that's all fair. Well, the difference was $4,000 a house. So I said, so can we then reduce your contract by $4,000 a house? And he said, yeah. So we reduced house price of drywall, just drywall, by $4,000 a house that day. And the contractor was still making a fair profit, which I can't quite remember what that was. I think it was there 25 or 35%. I can't remember what his profit margin was on that, but we agreed to it. And so a couple of questions. Why didn't they know that they were paying $4,000 a house too much? They had 4 bids on that community, and they awarded to the lowest of 4 bids. And then reduced prices over and over and over again from the begging sessions. So how come they didn't know that they were paying $4,000 a house? Because they're managing contracts, not costs. So when you manage unit cost, it becomes blatantly obvious how much you should be paying. I mean, this purchasing team could have gone down to Home Depot and looked at the price of drywall and realized that they were paying way too much. It is very reasonable for a builder to assume that he should be paying much less for drywall than a homeowner would at Home Depot. So at least they could have done that, but they couldn't because they had lump sum number. So they put a lot of process in the 3-bid process, and a lot of faith in the 3-bid process, and it wasn't doing them as much good as they thought it was. Now I want to follow that up with another story. That one alone might bring up some questions, but let me tell another story first. So I was wanting to add some subcontractors to my bid list. I was talking to a subcontractor. He had a reputation for quality, and we were a high quality builder, and so we were looking for that. And they had a good sized crews, and so we thought they had the production capacity. And so I went to his office and I asked him if we could add him to our bid list, and he rejected. He said no. I was shocked. I mean, we were a gigantic builder. We had a good reputation. We paid fast. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Why would I get rejected? And it took a little while for me to get it out of him because he didn't want to tell me. But eventually he did. He said, look, I know the subcontractor who's doing your work now. And if I take one of his jobs, he's going to go low bid some of my jobs and take my jobs away from this other builder I usually work for. And so when a builder, forces me to bid on their jobs, I will bid high so that I won't get the job, so that guy keeps it, so that he doesn't go mess with my jobs. So there's a subcontractor interplay going on that builders are not always savvy to, that you can't see when you have lump sum pricing. So those two stories together, really opened my eyes as to the need for unit pricing. But it wasn't easy to get. But I did find out that not only did I need unit pricing, once I got unit pricing, oh my gosh, first of all, my prices went way down. And then it opened up a gate to all these supply chain methodologies that other industries have been using that I could take advantage of. It was a pretty great epiphany for me.
I mean, it's really interesting just to hear these real world case studies of what actually can happen out there. We are BuildExact has a integration with Epic or BizTrack. That might not mean much to builders that are listening, but Epic or BizTrack is basically the software program that most dealers in North America use to manage their inventory. And the reason we did that integration is to allow builders to actually have 24/7 access to their inventory and pricing. And the reason we did that was so that the builders could have really clear understanding of what their cost per unit basis is in anything that they're planning in pre-production and production as they go through. So in provisioning that service, an interesting thing happens. We know that the average net builder uses 4 suppliers to complete the average project. I'm not talking about trades now, I'm talking about LBM suppliers. Once they're equipped with that information, and once the relationship is established as being collaborative, they're able then to actually focus their effort on that one relationship in a collaborative way to actually drive efficiencies and profits into their business. Now, I'm interested in your experience. You had examples of, a builder, reaching out to 52 other entities to be able to collaborate. Can you talk to me a little bit about that switch from, being isolated to actually working as a team in your supply chain?
Well, after the cycle time process improvement team, I told you the next step was we needed to do this all over again for materials. And we didn't do as big a robust event as that did, but me and a couple other guys, we started investigating. So we created this investigative process to find out where our materials were coming from. Because I'm embarrassed to say, although I hired 36 subcontractors to build my houses, I actually didn't know where they were getting their materials from. If a truck comes on site to deliver materials and there's a name on the side of the truck, okay, I could figure that one out. But I didn't really know. And so I was a little bit embarrassed about that too. So I needed to change that. And so we identified all of our SKUs by changing all of our bid sheets to our subcontractors. No more lump sum. If you don't want to participate in unit price agreements, then you can't do business with us. We didn't do it that hard and that fast. We did it in a very collaborative way because we didn't want to lose any of our subcontractors. We had really good ones, and they did a great job building our houses. In our particular area, high quality homes was imperative to get advantage over the sales advantage. And so we really handpicked a small group of subcontractors that were really good. So we didn't want to lose any of them. I thought when I started this process, I would lose about 30% of my subcontractors. I lost 5%. So we found out that, what I thought was going to be difficult to do wasn't as difficult. So let's go a step further. So unit pricing is all done. We have that completed now. Now, what can we do with that unit pricing? So there's a couple of things. One is, think about this. How come the electrician has never gone over to the finished carpenter and said, "Hey, your light fixtures, your hardware and my light fixtures go to the same house on the same day on a typical construction schedule. Why don't we put them on the same truck and drop our distribution cost by 50%, just like that?" Steve, not once has that ever been done. Not because we don't have good subcontractors. We do. And I had some great guys. I mean, they were really, really good. But they manage materials for their company. They don't manage materials for the house. So once you change your perspective and step back and look at material management from the house, little simple things like that become forehead slapping. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we haven't been doing this for decades. Why haven't we been doing more of this? So we consolidated distribution upstream and reduced costs that way. Then we put kits together. Kits are interesting. And there's an interesting story about that. If you go, arguably the best supply chain management school in the United States is Michigan State University. And the college that administers that supply chain program at MSU is called the Eli Broad College of Business. Eli Broad was the founder of Kaufman and Broad Home Corporation, which is now called KB Home. They started their business in Detroit, building houses at a lower cost, a mortgage cost than renting an apartment. They built 600 houses their first 2 years of business, huge success story. Well, one of the concepts that they used to keep their costs down was kitting. They went to their LBMers, or lumber and building material suppliers, and got them to kit the materials and deliver them to the job site, so or use the phrase ready to install. It gets the installer an opportunity to hit the ground running the moment he gets there. You don't have to worry about the installer forgetting to bring out this or forgetting to bring out that. I can't tell you how many millions of times that as a job site superintendent, a worker tells, I forgot to bring out a fan. I'll bring it out tomorrow or next time I'm in the area. And that, oh, I forgot something, costs our industry a lot of inefficiency. And so this consolidation of distribution upstream and kitting were two methodologies that we used when we got unit pricing to be able to control costs, increase production capacity, because those kits really increase production capacity. If the guy doesn't have to drive back to the shop to get something and come back out, oh my gosh, that's a lot of windshield time that was saved.
Well, it's interesting you say that about the kits, because we saw that as well. And we saw that as when we were building the technology for BuildExact. And so, within the software, a supplier can actually build an assembly. This basically becomes a one-click ordering process for his builder customers for that very, very, very straightforward reason. So there's a lot of efficiencies out there in what you're saying, absolutely.
Two of the favorite kits that I did was electrical, finished electrical and rough electrical. And the reason that is one of my favorites is because I didn't have to teach the distributor how to do that. Electrical distributors already do that for commercial construction. So when we went to them and talked about doing that for production and residential construction, they went, oh yeah, easy. I'll take you out to the back right now and show you how we do it. Mm-hmm. And the guys who work in those electrical distributor shops are often prior electricians. And so they put things on the pallet in the order that they know the electrician's going to need to pull them off of. And so electricians loved it. They're like, oh my gosh, this is so easy. I don't have to worry about forgetting anything, to put on my truck. And we didn't put everything in the kit. Most of the things were in there. But I told the electrician, look, you bring your own wire ties, ground clips, the small pieces and parts that get used in undescribed, you never know how many ground clips you're going to use. And so you never know how many wire ties you're going to end up using. So it's easier for him to manage those from house to house than it is to put them on a kit. And so some kits are like that, and we refined them as we went on. And some kits we put together were terrible. It just didn't work out at all. And some kits we did were absolutely amazing. We did a min-max thing for paint. So we had this great paint deal from a paint manufacturer who gave us an upgrade color, so everything wasn't just white. And so we're doing a lot of two-tone paints for the same price that other builders were getting single, just white paint for. So we got upgraded paint, and we had this container on the construction site where the supplier came in and put the material on the back end, and the painters took it out of the front end. The material just constantly rotated through that, and so we had a min-max, so it was a minimum. So when the paint quantity reached the minimum, the paint manufacturer came and filled up the container up to the maximum level. And each time that the painters came to get another 5-gallon bucket out of the container, they just marked what house they were using it on. When I started that, I didn't have much faith in the painter's ability to tell me what paint was going on which house. I thought, oh, this is going to be messy. I'm going to have to do some averages in order to get the right job costing per house. Oh my goodness, they were so good at it. And so we actually didn't require any averaging to figure that out. So it's amazing how capable our subcontractors are at doing things that are differently than we've always done them, and just that nobody ever asked.
I think it's really interesting. In the best case scenario, the builders on this call, will have a preferred supplier. Best case scenario, that supplier is getting maybe 65% of their total building materials purchases. There's a that's a whole lot of room that supplier is really interested in, and they're very interested in having a conversation with the builder about how they can add value and how they can add services to be able to get what the dealer will call a bigger share of the builder's wallet just by collaborating. What do you, Ken, conscious of time, you and I could talk about this for hours as we have done. For the builders on the call, the principles in how much is the milk, once you net them out, really straightforward about taking control of your cost of your business, collaborating with your supply chain, really having an open collaborative rather than a standoff 3-bid type process. What are the top 2 or 3 things that you'd suggest the builders on the call would look at after this call, relative to their business, consistent with the message that you're conveying in the book? What should they do?
There's a question I started asking to my subcontractors and LBMers that gave me that opened my eyes. I started asking them, hey, what is it we do that costs you money? And the first time I asked that question, because you're their customer, they don't want to upset you or say anything, that which could be offensive in any way. They'll give you some kind of very safe answer. But you ask it again and again and again, what is it we do that costs you money? What can I do to lower your costs, your operations costs? Look, if you're a tough negotiator, in which I used to be, which I'm not, which I am ashamed of, you can get pricing down. You can get people to reduce their margins lower and lower and lower and get your products or labor. I call them tough guy negotiations. And so tough guys can get pricing down. I know, I used to be the tough guy, but it's not sustainable. If you want sustainable cost savings, you've got to work together to lower each other's costs. And when I started asking my subcontractors, what is it we do that costs you money? Oh my gosh, I got an earful. And then when I went and I said, hey, can I meet your supplier? Which they really don't want you to do. Subcontractors will put a barrier up between you and their supplier. They don't want you to meet them because they fear that you're going to start buying direct from them and they're going to lose business and they're going to lose profit. And there's a lot of fears around that. So there's a barrier there. So if you get past that barrier and you go talk to them, especially without the subcontractor there, sometimes you find out, let me tell you this, there's a subcontractor we had used for about 7 years, did great work, good pricing, high quality, great production capacity. We went to talk to their supplier and this is some of the things they said. They said, he's very difficult to deal with. He often offends the girl we have working in the front office. He puts in his order just 24 to 48 hours before he needs it, and then he changes it during that period of time, making it very difficult for us to fill the order. He doesn't pay his bills. He's 120 days out. We're constantly nagging him to pay his bill, and on and on and on. And I asked the supplier, do those things affect the pricing that you're giving him? He was like, of course it does. Do you give better pricing to people who are easier to work with? Of course we do. So volume isn't the only thing that which merits a good price. He says, no. He says, we like volume because volume means that I use less salespeople to get the same amount, a large amount of work. But sometimes if they're so difficult to deal with, we just add what we call a nuisance factor to that pricing. And so almost all of the things that lumber building material distributor goes complaining about, me as the builder, I can solve in an instant, right? We put him on a fast pay. He was getting paid in 10 days, not 120. It was based on the construction. As soon as the construction schedule task was ticked off, boom, he got an automatic payment. Oh my gosh, this guy was so happy. And so orders were going in faster. He was getting paid faster. We had his ear. And so pricing came down because we lowered his costs. When you work together with whether it's a subcontractor, a dealer, distributor, manufacturer, when you work together to lower each other's costs, that's when you have sustainable savings. And that's when you find out the things that you need to do to increase your production capacity. You having trouble getting windows? go have a heart-to-heart talk with the manufacturer of the windows and understand what it is that in his operations that's going on that you can have an influence with. Someone's getting their windows, right? And you want it to be you. And the way that happens is by becoming preferred customer. And you become a preferred customer by doing those things. It helps to lower each other's costs, and those are great conversations, and it makes doing business much funner. I tell you, being the tough guy is not, it doesn't make you jump out of bed and excited to go to work, you know, one day. But having an opportunity to work together to lower each other's costs completely changes your relationships with your labor and material suppliers, making business way funner than it currently is.
This relationship piece is really important, right? We succeed when people want us to succeed, right? So when we have suppliers on our team, you know, and trust me, the ERP systems that I referred to earlier, universally, all of them have different profiles for customers, not just on price, but difficulty to serve, you know, the number of times a truck has to go out to a site. If somebody is lazy with bill of quantities and ordering too much material just because they don't want to get it right, the supplier's got to come back out and pick up the surplus stock. All this stuff eventually adds on to price. So, you know, opening up these conversations becomes a really important part.
Every lumber and building material distributor I talk to today has the same number one biggest complaint. We brought materials out there and they weren't ready. We had to turn around and bring them back. And so, you know, we're talking about increasing production capacity of our supply chain. Well, we could do it by making sure that if we call someone out to the job site's ready for them. They only have to do it one time instead of doing it twice. And if we can fill up trucks instead of doing less than truckload shipments, we can have a big impact on less tire tracks to the job site, which means less cost and more production capacity for them to be delivered elsewhere.
And I think the other view that I think was valuable for me today is don't manage contracts, manage the home. And so from that perspective, there's another point in your book where you talk about this 3 bids in a prayer process. You basically, a builder sends out a bid request to 3 separate contractors. There's 3 separate takeoffs. And neither one of those takeoffs are necessarily reliable, or they're potentially reliable, but you don't have control over them. All right, that's the prayer part. So recognizing that, finding the tools to be able to actually give the builder the control, like they can get through management tools like Builders Act, enables a lot of the ideas you're suggesting in your book to actually occur. Because the one, you know, managing by prices, absolutely, you're right, by SKU rather than by contract, is all now much more feasible than it was, you know, pre these integrated programs that allowed you to have access to your supplier inventory. Well, I think we're getting close to time. Any questions just quickly from the team, or if not, then last comments, Ken?
I often get asked from guys who build 10 homes a year, do these supply chain management methodologies apply to me? And I see what you did, you know, working for the top 10 home builders. I get it. I see what's going on. But I build 10 homes a year. Does that really apply to me? Oh my goodness, yes. Oh my goodness, yes. And let me tell you why. You know, when I talk, you can increase the production capacity of your suppliers by giving them advance notice of SKUs and date needed data. If you're providing that information 30, 60, 90 days ahead of time, giving them the opportunity to demand plan, they can optimize their inventory and optimize construction operations or manufacturing operations. And so that's date needed. So you, as a small builder, can magnify your value to the supply chain by providing SKUs and date needed data 30, 60, 90 days in advance. And the reason that will set you apart as a preferred customer over other over bigger builders or doing higher volume is because they're not doing it. If they were doing it, they would be tough for you to set it apart, but they're not. So this will really set you apart, and you know, talk to your suppliers about that. Hey, if you had every order 90 days in advance, how would that change your business?
Oh, yeah.
And watch their eyes wide.
And there's a question from Sarah around your principles around costing, cost management, and your cost cycle applied to HVAC, like edge metals, etc.
HVAC was a category where we did kitting, and buying equipment's pretty easy. Condensers, coils, and that's easy enough. But putting flex duct and boxes and thermostats and grills and registers was a little bit of a trick, but we got it done. And so the manufacturer we had gone out and done that with created this new process for kitting, which was pretty cool. We decided not to do it. There wasn't enough benefit financially for the amount of resources it would have took for us, so we didn't do it. But the subcontractor loved the idea, loved what we had put together, and then they started buying those kits from that supplier, and we shared in the I think it was an $85 a house savings, which we split. So he reduced his contract by half of that, and he benefited from a lower price from the distributor. So sometimes, you know, you're going to come across something that you just decide, it's a good idea, but it's not going to work for us right here, right now, at this point in time. Things change. So.
Well, I think what we'll have to do, Ken, is wrap up. For the audience, I believe Beth from my team will send an email out to make sure if you have any additional questions for Ken, that you'll be able to send them through via email.
I would be happy to.
Lovely to see you again, Ken, and really good to have a chat. This is really, what I like about what you've done with the book is you haven't attempted to make anything overly complicated. In fact, the way that you approach building is the way you approach writing, and it's a very consumable book. It's got some real down-to-earth practical advice in there that I think anybody could use in the building industry. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Steve. It was a pleasure.
We'll see you again soon.
See you.
Bye-bye.